The lawsuit against Tesla and the wrongful death of an engineer who crashed his car and died is going back to court, but there's a lot more to this story than meets the eye, and you have to read past the headlines, which is what we're going to do. I'm Brian. Welcome to Futuraza. So here's the thing. You got these stories. Is Tesla's trying to get an Apple engineer to testify in its defense at trial over a fatal autopilot crash. That sounds quite reasonable, doesn't it? Well, it turns out it's not. If you look at the URL for this story, you find that it's got a little bit going on here. It says, well, that URL represents the original title, which is Tesla accused of secretly working with Apple to fight lawsuit. Oh my gosh, that's so nefarious. We've got to get these beasts under control. How dare they? So that's complete nonsense. Let's get into the story and we'll talk about why. Tesla's being sued by the family of an Apple engineer who died in 2018 after his Model X crashed. The family accused Tesla's Autopilot of being defective and the cause of the collision. As the case goes to trial, Tesla plans to argue that the Apple engineer was distracted by his phone. So Tesla's set to go to trial over it again next week, probably this week by the time you read this. And now in the 11th hour, Tesla hopes to involve Apple itself in the case by calling an engineer as a witness in an attempt to prove that the driver was at fault. Now we know the driver was at fault because Autopilot is not self-driving. And it certainly wasn't a very capable system back in 2018, 2019. 2018. So there's a lot of room to question the technology. Someone who'd been using this for some amount of time should certainly know better. But you can get complacent, I guess, if you are an engineer at a company and you believe that all science and technology is infallible. I don't know. The family filed a wrongful death suit in 2019, saying it's defective. Because of the faults, that's why he died. No other reason, just that. Tesla did not respond to a request. Why would they? An investigation by NTSB previously found that while there's no singular cause for the crash, Tesla's Autopilot had system limitations. Correct. Adding that the driver had a game open on his phone, with him putting too much faith in the Autopilot function before the crash. That's it. That's the whole story. Investigators were unable to determine whether he was actively playing the game before the collision. So it doesn't say what the game was. Makes it kind of hard to do our own investigating to see, wait, have I played that game? Written statement from the engineer claims that the data extracted showed he was actively on his phone. Attorneys representing himself said, hey man, the discovery period's already ended. You can't introduce new stuff a few days before trial. I mean, you can. The court has already allowed it. They're trying to get it disallowed. The family attorney said Tesla revealed the first sworn statement 5 months after the discovery process ended and produced a second sworn statement only 3 days before trial. So you can get a stay. You can get a postponement of trial. I'm sure there's a word. Tell me in the comments what it is. It'll come to me, I'm sure. Apple said in an application to quash the subpoena that it was Apple's not a party to this case. I mean, yes, their engineers know best what the telematics on the phone might say, what all the information that is on there will tell you. But that doesn't mean they're a party. No, they're not a party. No one said they're a party to it. But if they're an expert and they've got the ability to provide insights and context, maybe that's important. Tesla faces several lawsuits concerning its Autopilot function. Now, here's the thing. We know this story has changed. We know because this title is pretty vanilla, and this one is pretty salacious. Tesla accused of secretly working with Apple to fight the lawsuit. A reputable publication, not Business Insider, someone else, would put in here somewhere, by the way, this story was updated. Has the text been updated? Has the story itself been updated? There's nothing about that because Business Insider is, as I have said many times in the past, damp trash. So let's look at The Verge. Not much better, generally speaking. They are. as I have called them, the verge of news. They're the verge of credible. They're so close, but so far away. Tesla's dragging Apple into its upcoming fatal... Dragging. Tesla wants to prove an Apple engineer was playing a game on his phone when his Model X smashed into a safety barrier. So Tesla's going to court. Same thing we heard. Engineer's name, the dates, all that. Now we've got a location, Highway 101 in Mountain View. That's something new. And the family's claiming that Tesla is secretly working with Apple to aid in its defense. Secretly. What does that mean, Verge? In a pretrial motion filed this week, lawyers representing them accuse them of engaging in secret discovery workaround to help support Tesla. That's not what discovery is. That's not how any of it works. But I don't expect this author to be thoroughly versed in law, but they should be a little versed in journalism. Now here we go. What is the game? NTSB found that a video game, a world-building strategy game with multiplayer capability, doesn't say what it is. Guys, this is 101. We need to know what it is. Is it the kind of game where you can leave it running and walk away? Where you can just put it on the passenger seat and not think about it? Before the drive, hit start, drop it in the back seat, don't pay attention. Is it that kind of game? Because if it is, great. But I don't know of very many games like that. Games don't want you to do that. Games want you to interact. That's the point of most games. Maybe there are ones that are burning you some Bitcoin in the background, but there's no indication that it's that kind of game. However, historical cell phone logs found a pattern of active gameplay during morning commute hours in the days leading up to the crash. And data transmission, consistent with online gaming activity. Family said that with the help of Apple, they're trying to overturn this at the last minute. No, your odds are already slim. They're presenting more evidence that reduce your odds a bit further. That's it. Tesla and Apple are trying to circumvent the discovery process. Nope, there is a process, and this is part of it. We'll get to that in a second. Trial's a major test for ongoing legal efforts to pin crashes involving Autopilot. No, this might be the last effort. All the ones before have failed. It's ridiculous. So let's ask a question here. What is the game? Well, we have found what the game is. Total War, 3 Kingdoms. So what kind of game is that? Well, I happened to take a look and find out it is this kind. The kind that there's different story modes, 2 different story modes. It's a very complicated and involved game. And if you are doing any kind of multiplayer, you definitely don't want to walk away. Remember when Mom said, pause the game, it's time for dinner, and you said, Mom, it's an online multiplayer game? And she said, well, tell your friends to pause too. I'm sure that will work just fine when you tell your friends you're driving. Or rather, strangers from around the world. Well, he could have been playing it in single player mode. Sure. But this is not, in any way that I can determine, the kind of game that you play without paying attention, that you leave running in the background. It could be. Maybe he's terrible at the game. That's why he has to do so much of it while he's supposed to be commuting. It's entirely possible. Now, remember, you are responsible for your car. In this article, we find out that the report noted that the computer detected his hands weren't on the steering wheel at the time of the crash. That makes sense. His hands weren't on the wheel, and his eyes were not looking forward. We now have cabin monitoring because of people like this, because of people who abuse the system, because of people who used it in ways that are very unsafe. Deadly, even. It's lack of response. The NTSB said the lack of response due to distraction, likely from a cell phone game application, and also over-reliance on Autopilot. So let's talk real quick about the whole thing about discovery. Because when can you no longer submit evidence in a trial? So here's an answer. There's a bunch of times you can. But the biggest one is the good cause exception. The other is that late introduction is usually allowed only for good cause. The evidence was only discovered or only came into being at the last minute. If this information was not known to Tesla before the original discovery period, and it has since come to their attention. They have since found this evidence. It can be admitted. And also considers the prejudice to each side of excluding the evidence. If you excluded this evidence that Tesla most likely was innocent, or at least that the driver was not paying attention, then it could severely harm that particular side of the case. Even if judges are loath to exclude highly material smoking gun evidence that could otherwise be admissible and clearly resolve the case on its merits, but are likely to rebuff efforts to introduce evidence not disclosed in a timely motion if it is cumulative or secondary in importance. This doesn't strike me as secondary, and this is not a cumulative matter. It is one item. It is one sworn statement and a follow-up sworn statement. So there's a lot of room for this to be introduced. They're grasping at straws. They've lost a loved one. The family is still grieving. It's time to put this chapter to bed. People make mistakes. This driver made a mistake, and he paid for it with his life, unfortunately. So that's sadly how it goes. What did I miss? What did I misunderstand? And the reason I had to bring this up was because of this huge amount of dishonesty by Business Insider. They're just the worst. They are so biased in favor of lies. There are a lot of negative stories you could spin without resorting to lies. They won't do it because the lies are easier. Man, do they sell. So what do we miss? What do we misunderstand? Leave it all in them comments below. If you want to support the channel, you can use my referral code. Help me out on Patreon, YouTube, or X. All of those ways help. And I know when the stock is down, it's tough to offer support, and I don't fault you for it. I'm just glad you're here. So smack the thumb in either direction, subscribe if you haven't, and stay tuned, stay juicy. And I cannot wait to hear from you clever robots, perhaps at one of my upcoming events. I'll be speaking at the Ride and Drive event in Portland on April 28th. Look it up, oeva.org.